The medical bay of the Zephyrian flagship Eternal Dawn hummed with desperate energy. Dozens of the galaxy's finest healers worked frantically around a crystalline chamber that pulsed with dying light. Inside lay Queen Virithess, her normally radiant azure skin now pale and mottled with spreading black veins that seemed to consume her life force with each passing moment. Dr. Kethmori, the chief medical officer, stepped back from the scanner with trembling hands. His four eyes blinked rapidly as he processed the impossible readings. "The toxin, it's unlike anything in our databases," he whispered to the assembled council members. "It's not just killing her, it's unmaking her at a molecular level." The Zephyrian Royal Council stood in stunned silence. These beings had ruled a peaceful federation of over 200 worlds for 3 millennia. Their biotechnology was the most advanced in known space, capable of curing diseases that had plagued other species for eons. Yet here they stood, helpless as their beloved queen slowly dissolved from within. "How much time does she have?" asked General Mordak, his usually stoic demeanor cracking. "Dr. Kethmori's voice barely rose above a whisper. 7 days. Perhaps less." The poison coursing through Queen Virithess wasn't random. It was a masterpiece of biological warfare, designed specifically to target Zephyrian physiology. Only one species in the galaxy possessed both the knowledge and the cruelty to create such a weapon: the Drakthul Empire. For decades, the Drakthul had watched the peaceful Zephyrian Federation grow stronger, their jealousy festering into hatred. Where Zephyrians brought healing and unity, the Drakthul brought conquest and subjugation. The two civilizations represented opposing philosophies of existence itself. The assassination attempt had been flawlessly executed. During a diplomatic dinner celebrating a new trade agreement with the Centauri Collective, Queen Virithess had collapsed mid-sentence. Security footage showed nothing. No projectiles, no suspicious movements, no obvious source of attack. The poison seemed to have simply appeared in her system, as if manifested by dark magic. But Admiral Vextar, the Royal Guard, knew better. His investigation had uncovered microscopic traces of Drakthul biotechnology in the Queen's ceremonial goblet. The poison had been engineered to activate only when it detected Zephyrian royal bloodline markers, a biological signature so specific that it could target only one being in the entire galaxy. "We've exhausted every treatment in our medical archives," reported Dr. Kethmori to the emergency session of the Royal Council. "The poison adapts to everything we try. It's as if it's learning from our attempts to cure it." Council member Lyranus, the Federation's top diplomat, leaned forward. "What about our allies? Surely someone in the galaxy has encountered something similar." "We've sent distress calls to every member world, every allied species, every medical institution we know," replied Dr. Kethmori. "The Altarian healers, the Rigelian bioengineers, even the mysterious Void Walkers. None have any knowledge of this toxin or how to counteract it." The room fell silent except for the rhythmic hum of the Queen's life support systems. Each pulse seemed fainter than the last. General Mordak stood slowly, his massive frame casting shadows across the medical bay. "There is one option we haven't considered." The council members turned to him with varying expressions of hope and dread. Mordak was known for his strategic brilliance, but also for suggesting solutions that others found unthinkable. "The humans," he said simply. A ripple of shocked murmurs filled the chamber. Humans were still considered a primitive species by most galactic standards. They had only achieved faster-than-light travel 300 years ago and had been part of the galactic community for barely 2 centuries. Their technology was crude, their lifespan short, their societies chaotic and divided. "General, with respect, humans are barely out of their technological infancy," protested Science Advisor Yelandra. "What could they possibly know about Drakthul biotechnology that we don't?" Mordak pulled up a holographic display showing various conflict reports from the past century. "Because they've been fighting the Drakthul longer than anyone else. And winning." The display showed battle after battle, where human forces had faced seemingly impossible odds against Drakthal fleets and emerged victorious. Not through superior technology or overwhelming numbers, but through something the galaxy had rarely seen before: adaptability coupled with reckless courage. Humans don't think like us, Mordak continued. Where we seek elegant solutions, they find clever workarounds. Where we follow established protocols, they improvise. Their medical techniques are primitive by our standards, but they have something we've lost in our millennia of advancement: desperation-driven innovation. Dr. Kethmori shook his head. Their medical technology is thousands of years behind ours. They still use crude chemical compounds and primitive surgical techniques. How could they help where our biomolecular restoration chambers have failed? Because sometimes the crude approach works where the sophisticated one doesn't, Mordak replied. I've studied human medical history. They've survived plagues that should have wiped them out, developed cures for diseases using methods that shouldn't work according to standard galactic medical theory. They call it thinking outside the box. Council member Threndos, the eldest member of the Assembly, spoke for the first time during the session. Even if humans possessed some unconventional medical knowledge, how would we convince them to help? Relations between our species have been cordial, but distant. It was true. While humans had never been hostile toward the Zephyrian Federation, they had also never formed the close alliances that Zephyrians enjoyed with other species. Humans seemed to prefer working in smaller groups, maintaining independence rather than seeking integration into larger galactic communities. We offer them something they can't refuse, Mordak said: access to our biotechnology databases. The humans have been struggling with genetic diseases for millennia. Our knowledge could eliminate suffering for billions of their people. Dr. Kethmori's expression was skeptical. And if they refuse? Or if they accept but prove unable to help? Then we will have lost nothing but pride, Mordak replied. The Queen dies either way if we do nothing. The stark truth of that statement settled over the room like a weight. Queen Virithess wasn't just their leader. She was the living symbol of everything the Zephyrian Federation represented. Her death would shatter the morale of 200 worlds and potentially destabilize the most peaceful region of the galaxy. There's another factor to consider, said Admiral Vextar, who had been quietly reviewing intelligence reports on his personal tablet. The Drakthal Empire has been mobilizing fleets along our border. If the Queen dies, they'll likely launch a full invasion while we're paralyzed by grief and succession disputes. The implications were staggering. The Zephyrian Federation's strength came from unity and cooperation, not military might. Without their queen to hold the alliance together, individual worlds might surrender rather than face the Drakthal war machine. Council member Lyranus stood and began pacing. Assuming we decide to contact the humans, who would we approach? Their species has no unified government, no single authority we could negotiate with. There's a human physician named Dr. Sarah Chun, Mordak said, pulling up another holographic display. She works at something called the Institute for Xenological Medicine on Earth. She's published papers on treating diseases in non-human species. More importantly, she's the daughter of Admiral Chun Wei, the human military officer who defeated the Drakthal at the Battle of Kepler, 442. The display showed a relatively young human female with dark hair and intense eyes. Her credentials were impressive by human standards, though still primitive compared to Zephyrian medical training. What caught the Council's attention, however, was her research into diseases affecting multiple species, exactly the kind of cross-species medical challenge they now faced. She's also served as a field medic in human military operations against the Drakthal, Mordak continued. She may have direct experience with their biological weapons. Dr. Kethmori studied Dr. Chen's medical records with growing interest. Her methods are unorthodox, but her success rate in treating previously incurable conditions is statistically significant. She seems to excel at finding solutions when conventional treatments fail. The question remains, said Council Member Threndos. Would she be willing to leave her world and come here? We're asking a human to risk her life for a species she barely knows, to treat a condition that has baffled the galaxy's greatest minds. Admiral Vextar had been running calculations on his tactical computer. If we send our fastest diplomatic ship, we could reach Earth in 18 hours. That would give us 6 days to work with Dr. Chun before. He didn't need to finish the sentence. The weight of decision pressed down on the council members. They were about to place their queen's life, and potentially the fate of their entire civilization, in the hands of a species they had always considered inferior. "I'll go personally," Mordak announced. "A general making the request will demonstrate how seriously we take this. And if the humans have any political concerns about helping us, my presence will show that this isn't just a medical emergency. It's a matter of galactic stability." Dr. Kethmori stepped forward. "I should accompany you. Dr. Chun will need complete medical data about the Queen's condition, and I can provide technical context that your military background might not cover." "No," Mordak replied firmly. "Your place is here, monitoring the Queen's condition and preparing for whatever treatment Dr. Chun might suggest. Send your best assistant with me, someone who understands the medical aspects, but can be spared from the Queen's care." Dr. Kethmori nodded reluctantly. "Dr. Yildan is our specialist in xenobiology. She studied human physiology and could serve as a liaison." The council voted quickly. Time was running out, and debate had become a luxury they couldn't afford. The decision was unanimous. Contact the humans and hope that their crude but innovative approach could achieve what advanced Zephyrian science could not. As Mordak prepared to depart for Earth, he took one last look at Queen Virithess through the crystalline chamber. The black veins had spread further across her skin, and her breathing had become even more labored. In 6 days, either human ingenuity would save the most beloved leader in the galaxy, or the Zephyrian Federation would begin its darkest chapter. The general ship launched from the eternal dawn with a small diplomatic crew and Dr. Yildan. As they entered hyperspace, racing toward a distant blue world where a human doctor was about to receive the most important medical consultation request in galactic history, Queen Virithess fought to survive another day. Behind them, the Drakthal Empire continued massing ships along the border, waiting for news of the Zephyrian Queen's death. They had no idea that their ancient enemies had just decided to seek help from the one species in the galaxy they truly feared: humans, with their unpredictable methods and stubborn refusal to accept defeat. Dr. Sarachan was about to discover that sometimes the universe's greatest challenges require not advanced technology or elegant solutions, but the very human qualities that more sophisticated species had long since abandoned: desperation, creativity, and the willingness to try something that shouldn't work but just might. The race against time had begun, and the stakes couldn't be higher. In 6 days, either human medicine would achieve the impossible, or the galaxy's most peaceful civilization would fall to the cruelest empire known to exist. The only certainty was that nothing would ever be the same. Dr. Sarah Chun had been working for 16 hours straight when the emergency alert echoed through the Institute for Xenological Medicine. She looked up from her microscope, where she'd been analyzing tissue samples from a Rigelian patient suffering for what appeared to be an autoimmune disorder. The flashing red lights and urgent tone meant only one thing: a galactic priority medical emergency. Sarah rubbed her tired eyes and made her way to the communications center. At 28, she was the youngest department head in the Institute's history, a position she'd earned through a combination of brilliant research and practical field experience treating wounded soldiers during humanity's border conflicts with the Drakthal Empire. The communications officer, Lieutenant Rodriguez, looked up as she approached. "Dr. Chun, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Zephyrian Federation flagship. They're requesting immediate medical consultation with you specifically." Sarah's eyebrows rose in surprise. The Zephyrians rarely contacted Earth directly, preferring to work through diplomatic channels. For them to make a direct request meant something extraordinary was happening. "Put them through to Conference Room Alpha," Sarah instructed. "Maximum encryption and record everything for the Institute's archives. Sarah quickly changed from her lab coat into a formal diplomatic jacket. First impressions mattered when dealing with alien species, especially one as refined as the Zephyrians. She grabbed her personal tablet and headed to the conference room, her mind already running through possibilities. What kind of medical emergency could have prompted the galaxy's most advanced healing civilization to contact humans? The holographic display activated, showing the bridge of a Zephyrian ship. Sarah immediately recognized the distinctive architecture, flowing, organic curves that seemed to blend technology with art. Standing at the center of the projection was a tall, imposing figure she identified as a Zephyrian general based on his uniform's intricate patterns. Dr. Chun, the general began, his voice carrying the melodic quality typical of his species. I am General Mordak of the Zephyrian Royal Guard. I come to you with an urgent request that may determine the fate of our civilization. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. The Zephyrians weren't prone to dramatic statements. If a general was saying their civilization was at stake, the situation had to be genuinely catastrophic. I'm listening, General, Sarah replied, keeping her voice calm and professional. Our queen, Virathes, has been poisoned with a Drakthul bioweapon, Mordak continued. Our most advanced medical technology has proven useless against it. The toxin is designed specifically to target Zephyrian physiology, and it's unmaking her at the molecular level. She has perhaps 6 days to live. Sarah's mind immediately began processing the implications. A bioweapon that could defeat Zephyrian medicine would be incredibly sophisticated. The Drakthul were known for their cruelty, but this level of targeted biological warfare suggested a new level of threat. General, I'm honored that you would consider human medical assistance, but I have to ask, why us? Your biotechnology is centuries ahead of ours. What makes you think human medicine could help where Zephyrian science has failed? The general's expression grew grim. Because you have fought the Drakthul longer and more successfully than any other species. Your methods are unconventional. Sometimes unconventional is exactly what's needed. A second figure stepped into view, a female Zephyrian with a blue-tinted skin and elongated features typical of their medical caste. Dr. Chun, I am Dr. Yildan, specializing in xenobiology. We've studied your published research on cross-species disease treatment. Your success rate with supposedly incurable conditions is remarkable. Sarah felt the weight of the situation settling on her shoulders. What exactly are the symptoms? How does this bioweapon work? Dr. Yildan activated a holographic medical display. Sarah found herself looking at the most beautiful and terrifying thing she'd ever seen in her medical career. The Zephyrian queen lay in a crystalline medical chamber, her normally luminous skin now marked with spreading black veins that pulsed with dark energy. The poison targets cellular regeneration pathways, Dr. Yildan explained. It prevents damaged cells from repairing themselves while simultaneously accelerating the aging process. But it's more than that. It seems to be breaking down the quantum-level bonds that hold matter together at the biological scale. Sarah studied the readouts, her medical training translating the alien symbols into concepts she could understand. The sophistication of the weapon was staggering. It wasn't just killing the queen, it was systematically deconstructing her existence. Have you tried quantum cellular reconstruction? Sarah asked. Our first approach, Dr. Yildan replied. The toxin adapted to it within hours. We've attempted molecular-level intervention, genetic therapy, even experimental consciousness transfer protocols. The poison learns from everything we try. Sarah was quiet for a moment, processing the information. An adaptive bioweapon that could counter advanced medical technology suggested something truly diabolical. But as she studied the medical readouts, a pattern began to emerge, something her Zephyrian colleagues might have missed precisely because their approach was so sophisticated. Dr. Yildan, you said the toxin targets cellular regeneration. What if that's not its primary function? What if that's just a side effect? The Zephyrian doctor's 4 eyes blinked in confusion. I don't understand. In human medicine, we often see treatments fail because we're addressing symptoms rather than root causes, Sarah explained. Your scans show the toxin is breaking quantum bonds, right? But what if that's not the weapon? What if that's the delivery system? General Mordak leaned forward. Explain. Sarah pulled up her own medical tablet and began sketching diagrams in the air with her stylus. Humans have been exposed to Drakthal bioweapons before, though nothing this sophisticated. But we've learned something important. Drakthal biology is fundamentally different from most other species. They don't just build weapons, they build weapons that think. Dr. Yildan's expression shifted from confusion to alarm. You're suggesting the toxin is intelligent? Not intelligent exactly, but adaptive in a way that suggests it's not following pre-programmed parameters. It's learning because it's designed to learn. The question is, learning what? Sarah began pacing, her mind racing through possibilities. Dr. Yildan, I need to see the complete molecular structure of the toxin. Not just its effects, but its actual composition. The Zephyrian doctor hesitated. Dr. Chun, that information is highly classified. The complete structure of a Drakthal bioweapon could be used to create similar weapons, I understand, Sarah interrupted. But I can't help without understanding exactly what we're fighting. General Mordak made a decision. Share the data, Dr. Yildan. We're already beyond the point of standard protocols. The holographic display filled with complex molecular diagrams that made Sarah's head spin. The toxin was incredibly sophisticated, built from compounds she didn't recognize arranged in patterns that seemed to defy standard chemical laws. But as she studied the structure, something nagged at her, a familiarity she couldn't quite place. Wait, Sarah said suddenly. Can you rotate that section there? The one with the triple helix configuration? Dr. Yildan manipulated the display, and Sarah felt her breath catch. Hidden within the alien molecular structure was something that looked almost familiar, a pattern that resembled Earth-based viral RNA, but wrong somehow, as if someone had taken a common cold virus and twisted it into something unrecognizable. Dr. Yildan, has anyone analyzed this toxin for Earth-based biological components? Why would we? Humans have never encountered. Dr. Yildan stopped mid-sentence, her expression shifting to one of growing alarm. You think there's human biological material in a Drakthal weapon? Sarah was already running calculations on her tablet. The Drakthal have been studying every species they've encountered, learning their weaknesses, building weapons specifically designed to exploit their biology. But humans are relatively new to the galactic community. What if they incorporated human biological elements as a way to make their weapons more adaptable? The implications were staggering. If the toxin contained human biological components, it might be vulnerable to human medical approaches that would seem primitive and ineffective to more advanced species, but which might work precisely because they were designed for human biology. General, I need to examine the Queen in person, Sarah said. I need to take tissue samples, run tests using human medical equipment, try treatments that your technology might not even recognize as medicine. General Mordak and Dr. Yildan exchanged glances. Bringing a human onto their flagship would be unprecedented, potentially dangerous, and certainly controversial. Dr. Chun, Dr. Yildan said carefully, our Queen's condition is extremely delicate. Any foreign biological contamination could kill her faster than the poison already is. Sarah interrupted. Dr. Yildan, with respect, your Queen is dying. Your most advanced medical technology has failed. At this point, the risk of trying something unconventional is smaller than the risk of doing nothing. Sarah could see the internal struggle on the general's face. He was being asked to trust his Queen's life to a species his people had always considered primitive. But she could also see something else in his expression, desperation. What would you need? Mordak asked quietly. A small medical team, 2 nurses, and a lab technician, all volunteers. Basic human medical equipment, including some things your people might consider barbarically primitive. and complete access to the Queen for examination and treatment. The risk to your own life would be significant, Dr. Yilden pointed out. If you're wrong about the toxin's composition, exposure could kill you within hours. Sarah had already considered that possibility. She thought about her father, Admiral Chun Wei, who had spent his career fighting the Drakthal Empire. He'd always taught her that some fights were worth the risk, that sometimes the greatest danger came from refusing to act when action was needed. I understand the risks, Sarah replied. But if I'm right, if this toxin does contain human biological components, then human medicine might be the only thing that can save your queen. And if your queen dies, how many people across the galaxy will die when the Drakthal Empire invades? The connection was silent for a long moment as the Zephyrians considered her words. Sarah could almost feel the weight of their decision pressing through the holographic link. Finally, General Mordak spoke. Dr. Chun, we accept your offer. We're transmitting coordinates for a rendezvous point. We'll provide transport to our flagship. But you must understand, if you're wrong, if your treatments harm the Queen rather than help her, there will be those who consider you responsible for the destruction of our civilization. And if I'm right, Sarah replied, I might be helping to save it. As the transmission ended, Sarah felt the full magnitude of what she'd just committed to. In less than 24 hours, she would be aboard an alien spacecraft, using primitive human medicine to treat the most important patient in the galaxy. The irony wasn't lost on her. The same species that had always been considered backwards and crude by galactic standards was now the last hope for the most advanced civilization known to exist. Sarah immediately began assembling her team. She chose Nurse Patricia Wong, who had served with her during the Drakthal border conflicts and had experience treating alien physiology. Lab technician Marcus Johnson had the steadiest hands she'd ever seen and an intuitive understanding of biochemistry that went beyond his formal training. They were both volunteers, and both understood that they might not survive the mission. As they prepared their equipment, syringes that would seem laughably primitive to Zephyrian doctors, chemical compounds that other species had abandoned centuries ago, diagnostic tools that relied on crude electromagnetic scanning rather than sophisticated quantum analysis, Sarah found herself thinking about the nature of medicine itself. Advanced civilizations sought elegant solutions, treatments that worked at the quantum level to perfectly restore damaged tissue and eliminate disease. But human medicine had always been messier, more intuitive, based on the simple idea that sometimes the crude approach worked when the sophisticated one failed. If she was right about the toxin containing human biological elements, then the very primitiveness of human medicine might be exactly what was needed. The poison had learned to counter advanced Zephyrian techniques, but it might be completely unprepared for treatments that shouldn't work according to standard galactic medical theory. As Sarah's team prepared to depart Earth, racing toward a rendezvous with an alien flagship where the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance, she couldn't help but think that her father would be proud. Admiral Chun Wei had defeated the Drakthal through unconventional tactics and stubborn human determination. Now his daughter would try to do the same, using medicine instead of weapons, trying to heal instead of destroy. The next phase of the mission was about to begin, and everything depended on whether human medicine could achieve what the most advanced medical technology in the galaxy could not. In 5 days, either Dr. Sarah Chun would be celebrated as the savior of an alien queen, or she would be remembered as the human who failed when the universe needed her most. The docking bay of the Zephyrian flagship Eternal Dawn hummed with nervous energy as Dr. Sarah Chen's transport vessel approached. Through the massive transparent barriers, hundreds of Zephyrian crew members watched as the small human medical ship prepared to dock. Many had never seen a human in person, and the fate of their beloved queen now rested in the hands of these strange, short-lived beings. Sarah checked her equipment one final time as the docking clamps engaged. Her medical kit contained items that would have seemed primitive to most galactic civilizations. Basic syringes, chemical compounds synthesized on Earth, diagnostic scanners that relied on electromagnetic radiation rather than quantum analysis. But if her theory was correct, these crude tools might be exactly what was needed. Remember, Sarah told her team as they prepared to disembark, we're not trying to impress anyone with advanced technology. We're here to do medicine the way humans do medicine. Messy, intuitive, and effective. Nurse Patricia Wong nodded, her expression focused despite the extraordinary circumstances. Any specific concerns about alien physiology I should watch for? Zephyrians have a more complex cardiovascular system than humans, Sarah replied. Four-chambered heart, but with additional vessels that regulate their bioluminescent capabilities. Be careful with any medications that affect blood pressure. Lab technician Marcus Johnson was running final diagnostics on their portable equipment. Dr. Chun, I have to ask, what if we're completely wrong about this? What if human medicine is just inadequate for something this advanced? Sarah looked at her young colleague seriously. Marcus, I've been thinking about that. But here's the thing about human medicine that other species don't understand. We've always had to work with limited resources, making do with what we had rather than what we wished we had. That makes us very good at finding solutions that shouldn't work, but do. The airlock cycled, and Sarah's team stepped onto an alien spacecraft for the first time in their lives. The interior of the Eternal Dawn was breathtakingly beautiful, walls that seemed to be grown rather than built, with organic curves that channeled light in patterns that were both functional and artistic. The air itself seemed to shimmer with a faint luminescence. General Mordak waited to greet them, accompanied by Dr. Kethmori, whom Sarah recognized from the medical files she'd studied during the journey. The Zephyrian chief medical officer was tall even by his species standards, with skin that shifted between blue and silver as he moved. Dr. Chun, General Mordak, said, "Welcome aboard the Eternal Dawn. I wish the circumstances were more pleasant." Sarah inclined her head respectfully. "General, thank you for trusting us with this. Dr. Kethmori, I've reviewed the medical files you transmitted. The Queen's condition is unlike anything I've encountered, but there are elements that seem familiar." Dr. Kethmori's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a Zephyrian expression of skeptical hope. "Our Queen's life signs have continued to deteriorate. We now estimate less than 4 days remaining before total system failure." "Then, we better get started," Sarah replied. "I'd like to examine the Queen immediately, then run some preliminary tests using our equipment." As they walked through the ship's corridors toward the medical bay, Sarah was struck by how different the atmosphere felt compared to human vessels. Where human ships buzzed with constant activity and noise, the Eternal Dawn moved with an almost serene efficiency. Crew members glided through their duties with a graceful coordination that spoke to centuries of peaceful civilization. But beneath the surface calm, Sarah could sense the tension. These beings were facing the loss of everything they held dear, and they were placing their last hope in a species they barely understood. The medical bay was unlike anything Sarah had ever seen. The Queen lay in a crystalline chamber that pulsed with soft light, surrounded by monitoring equipment that seemed to blend seamlessly into the walls. The black veins that Dr. Yilden had shown her in the holographic transmission had spread even further across Queen Virithes's skin, creating an intricate pattern of decay that was both beautiful and horrifying. "May I?" Sarah asked, approaching the chamber. Dr. Kethmori activated controls that Sarah couldn't see, and a section of the crystalline wall became permeable. The smell that emerged was strange, not unpleasant, but distinctly alien, with undertones that reminded Sarah of ozone and growing plants. Sarah pulled on her examination gloves and leaned over the Queen. Queen Virithes was unconscious, but her breathing was shallow and irregular. The black veins weren't just surface markings. Sarah could see that they extended deep into the tissue, creating a web of corruption that seemed to pulse with its own dark energy. "Has anyone tried taking a tissue sample directly from the affected areas?" Sarah asked. "Too dangerous," Dr. Kethmori replied. "The toxin appears to spread through direct contact. Any sampling could accelerate the poisoning process." Sarah nodded, understanding their caution. But she also knew that human medicine sometimes required taking calculated risks that other species found unacceptable. Dr. Kethmori, with your permission, I'd like to take a small sample using our equipment. Our diagnostic methods might reveal something your quantum scanners missed. The Zephyrian doctor hesitated. The idea of using primitive human medical techniques on their queen went against every instinct he'd developed during centuries of medical practice. But as he looked at Queen Verithessa's deteriorating condition, he realized that conventional caution was a luxury they could no longer afford. "Proceed," he said quietly. Sarah carefully extracted a sample of the affected tissue using a simple needle biopsy, a technique so basic that most galactic medical facilities had abandoned it millennia ago. The sample looked innocuous enough in the collection vial, but Sarah could see the same dark energy pulsing through it. "Marcus, I need a full spectral analysis using our portable scanner," Sarah instructed. "Patricia, start setting up the treatment area. I want to be ready to begin therapy within the hour." As her team worked, Sarah studied the tissue sample under a microscope. What she saw confirmed her worst fears and her greatest hopes simultaneously. The toxin was indeed incredibly sophisticated, but buried within its structure were molecular patterns that she recognized. "Dr. Kethmori," Sarah called, "you need to see this." The Zephyrian doctor approached the human microscope with obvious skepticism. The device was so primitive that he almost couldn't believe it would reveal anything useful. But as he looked through the eyepiece, his expression changed to one of shocked recognition. "That structure there," he said, pointing to a section of the sample. "It resembles viral RNA, but the configuration is wrong somehow." "Not wrong," Sarah replied. "Modified." "Dr. Kethmori, what I'm seeing here is a hybrid organism, part Drakthal bioweapon, part Earth-based virus. The Drakthal have been studying human biology and incorporating our genetic material into their weapons. The implications hit Dr. Kethmori like a physical blow. They're using human biological components to make their weapons more adaptable. But that means the toxin might be vulnerable to human medical techniques," Sarah finished. "Dr. Kethmori, your quantum treatments failed because you were fighting the Drakthal components. But you weren't addressing the human viral elements that are actually controlling the weapon's adaptation mechanism." Sarah pulled up a three-dimensional model on her tablet, showing how the toxin structure incorporated both alien and human biological elements. "Look at this pattern here. This is based on a common Earth virus that causes respiratory infections. Harmless to humans, but the Drakthal have weaponized it to serve as a kind of biological computer, learning from everything it encounters." Dr. Kethmori studied the data with growing excitement. "If you're correct, then traditional human antiviral treatments might disrupt the weapon's learning capability." "Exactly. But it's more complex than that." Sarah highlighted different sections of the molecular structure. "The human components aren't just passengers. They're integral to the weapon's function. If we can selectively target the viral elements using human medicine, we might be able to cause a cascade failure in the entire system." Marcus Johnson looked up from his portable scanner. "Dr. Chun, I'm detecting massive electromagnetic activity in the tissue sample. The toxin is definitely more than just a poison. It's some kind of living system." Patricia Wong had finished setting up their treatment area, which looked almost comically primitive compared to the advanced Zephyrian medical equipment surrounding it. Simple 4 stands, bags of human-synthesized medications, and monitoring equipment that relied on basic electromagnetic sensors. "Dr. Kethmori," Sarah said, "I need to ask something that might sound crazy. Do you have any records of the Drakthal ever capturing human medical personnel?" The Zephyrian doctor's expression grew grim. 3 years ago, they attacked a human medical station in the Kepler system. Several doctors and researchers were taken prisoner. We assumed they were interrogated for intelligence and then executed. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. They weren't executed. They were studied. The Drakthal have been learning human medical techniques, figuring out how we think about disease and treatment, so they could build weapons that would be immune to our methods. But if they understand human medicine, Dr. Kethmori asked, how could human treatments possibly work against their weapons? Sarah smiled grimly. because they understand human medicine as it exists in textbooks and research papers. But human medicine isn't really about following textbooks. It's about adaptation, intuition, and trying things that shouldn't work but do. They can't predict what they don't understand. She began preparing her treatment protocol, combining medications and techniques in ways that had never been tried before. The approach was based on a theory that would have seemed insane to most galactic medical experts. Instead of trying to destroy the toxin directly, she would confuse it by flooding Queen Virithes's system with contradictory signals. Dr. Chen, Dr. Keth Mori said hesitantly, "What you're proposing goes against every principle of modern medicine. You're essentially trying to overwhelm a sophisticated bioweapon with chaos." "Not chaos," Sarah replied as she calculated dosages. "Controlled confusion. The toxin has learned to counter sophisticated, logical treatments. But humans don't always think logically about medicine. Sometimes we try multiple approaches simultaneously, combine treatments that shouldn't work together, and make intuitive leaps that bypass rational analysis." She held up a syringe filled with a compound that most galactic civilizations would have considered obsolete. "This is a basic human antiviral medication, combined with immune system stimulants that work through completely different biochemical pathways. The toxin will try to adapt to each component separately, but it won't know how to handle them all working together." Dr. Keth Mori looked at the primitive syringe with a mixture of fascination and horror. "Dr. Chun, if you're wrong about this, you could accelerate the Queen's death by days or even hours." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "Dr. Keth Mori, if I do nothing, your Queen dies anyway. And when she dies, how many more people will die when the Drakthal Empire invades? Sometimes in medicine, the biggest risk is not taking a risk." She looked at her team, who nodded their readiness. Patricia had prepared multiple 4 lines for rapid medication administration. Marcus had their monitoring equipment calibrated to track both human and Zephyrian physiological markers. They were as ready as they could be to attempt something that had never been tried before. "General Mordak," Sarah called to the military officer who had been observing silently. "I need your authorization to begin treatment." The general approached Queen Virithes's chamber, looking down at his dying leader. The black veins had spread even further during the time Sarah's team had been preparing, and the Queen's breathing had become increasingly labored. "Dr. Chun," Mordak said quietly, "our Queen has led our people for over 2 centuries. She has brought peace to countless worlds, ended wars, and made the galaxy a better place for billions of beings. Her death would be a tragedy beyond measure." He turned to face Sarah directly. "But if there's even a small chance that your methods could save her, then we must try. You have my authorization to proceed." Sarah nodded solemnly, understanding the weight of trust that had been placed in her hands. She approached the Queen's chamber, syringe ready, knowing that the next few minutes would determine the fate of an entire civilization. "Okay, team," she said quietly, "let's show the galaxy what human medicine can do." As Sarah prepared to inject the first dose of her unconventional treatment, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. General Mordak's communicator crackled to life with urgent reports. Drakthal ships had been detected massing at the border, preparing for what appeared to be a massive invasion fleet. The race against time had become even more desperate. Sarah had to save Queen Virithes not just from the toxin that was killing her, but from the enemy that was preparing to destroy everything she had built. And she had to do it using medicine that most of the galaxy would consider impossibly primitive. But as Sarah looked at her team, human medical professionals who had volunteered to risk their lives for an alien queen they'd never met, she felt a surge of the stubborn determination that had carried humanity through countless impossible situations. Sometimes the most advanced solution wasn't the best solution. Sometimes what the universe needed was simple human ingenuity and the courage to try something that shouldn't work, but my Dr. Sarah Chun inserted the needle into Queen Virithes's vein with the steady hands of someone who had treated wounded soldiers under enemy fire. The primitive human syringe looked almost comical next to the sophisticated Zephyrian medical equipment, but Sarah's theory depended on using exactly this kind of simple, direct approach. First dose administered, she announced to her team. Patricia, begin monitoring for any immediate reactions. Marcus, I want full spectral analysis of the tissue samples every 30 minutes. Dr. Kethmori watched the human medical procedures with fascination and growing anxiety. Everything about their approach contradicted centuries of advanced medical theory. Yet he couldn't deny that Sarah Chun possessed an intuitive understanding of disease treatment that was impressive by any standard. Dr. Chun, he said quietly, our scanners are detecting unusual electromagnetic activity around the injection site. Sarah nodded, studying the readouts on her portable monitor. That's the toxin trying to adapt to the antiviral compound. But, watch this, she prepared a second syringe with a completely different medication. Now I'm going to introduce an immune system stimulant that works through an entirely different biochemical pathway. As Sarah administered the second injection, the electromagnetic readings spiked dramatically. The black veins around the injection site began to pulse more rapidly, as if the toxin was struggling to process conflicting information. Remarkable, Dr. Kethmori whispered. The bioweapon is attempting to adapt to both treatments simultaneously, but they're interfering with each other's adaptation protocols. Exactly, Sarah replied, preparing a third syringe. The Drakthul designed this weapon to counter sophisticated, elegant treatments. But they didn't anticipate someone using multiple primitive treatments that create biochemical chaos. General Mordak approached the medical area, his expression tense. Dr. Chun, I need to update you on our tactical situation. Our long-range sensors have detected a Drakthul invasion fleet of over 300 ships approaching the border. They'll reach our territory in approximately 60 hours. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. 60 hours. Even if her treatment worked, would it work fast enough to save Queen Virithess before the invasion began? General, she said, has the Drakthul Empire said anything about their intentions? Any demands or ultimatums? Nothing official, Mordak replied. But our intelligence suggests they're waiting for confirmation of the Queen's death before launching their attack. They want our people to be paralyzed by grief and political uncertainty when the invasion begins. Sarah turned back to Queen Virithess, studying the monitoring data with new urgency. The first two treatments had definitely affected the toxin, but the Queen's overall condition hadn't improved yet. If anything, the biochemical conflict raging in her system was putting additional stress on her already weakened physiology. Dr. Chun, Patricia called from her monitoring station. The Queen's heart rate is becoming irregular. Blood pressure is dropping. Sarah quickly checked the readouts. The Queen's body was struggling with the combination of the toxin and the multiple treatments Sarah had administered. She was walking a tightrope, pushing the bioweapon past its adaptation limits while trying not to kill the patient in the process. Marcus, what does the tissue analysis show? Sarah asked. Marcus looked up from his scanner, excitement evident in his voice. Dr. Chun, you need to see this. The toxin's molecular structure is destabilizing. The viral components are starting to separate from the main weapon system. Sarah felt a surge of hope. Her theory was working. The human medicine was confusing the bioweapon's adaptation mechanisms. But the process was creating its own dangers. The Queen was essentially fighting two battles simultaneously, against the original toxin and against the biochemical chaos Sarah had introduced. Dr. Kethmori, Sarah said urgently, I need you to use your quantum cellular reconstruction technology, but not the way you tried before. The Zephyrian doctor looked confused. I don't understand. The quantum reconstruction failed completely when we attempted it. Because you're trying to fight the toxin directly, Sarah explained. But now the toxin is compromised. Its adaptation protocols are overwhelmed. If you use your advanced technology now, while the bioweapon is confused by my primitive treatments, you might be able to slip past its defenses. Dr. Kethmori's 4 eyes widened with understanding. You're suggesting a coordinated approach. Human medicine to confuse the weapon, Zephyrian technology to repair the damage while it's distracted. Exactly. We're not fighting the toxin with one approach or the other. We're using both simultaneously in a way the Drakthul never could have anticipated. Dr. Kethmori immediately began activating the quantum reconstruction systems that had failed so completely before. But this time, instead of targeting the toxin directly, he focused on the cellular damage it had caused, working around the bioweapon rather than against it. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The crystalline chamber around Queen Virithess began to glow more brightly as the quantum reconstruction technology interfaced with Sarah's biochemical disruption. For the first time since the poisoning, the black veins stopped spreading and began to fade. "It's working," Dr. Kethmori said in amazement. "The toxin can adapt to the quantum reconstruction because it's too busy trying to process the conflicting signals from the human treatments." Sarah allowed herself a moment of relief before focusing on the next challenge. "How long will the treatment take to complete?" "At least 18 hours for full cellular restoration," Dr. Kethmori replied. "But the Queen should regain consciousness within 6 to 8 hours if the improvement continues." General Mordak's expression remained grim. "Dr. Chun, that gives us perhaps 40 hours before the Drakthul fleet arrives. Even if Queen Virithess recovers, will she be strong enough to rally our defenses?" Sarah looked at the general seriously. "That's not really a medical question, General. But I can tell you this. If the Queen survives, it will be because two completely different medical philosophies work together to achieve something neither could accomplish alone. That might be worth remembering when you're planning your defense." Over the next several hours, Sarah's team maintained constant monitoring of the Queen's condition while the combined treatment protocols continued their work. The improvement was steady, but slow. The black veins gradually faded, the Queen's vital signs stabilized, and the electromagnetic chaos around the toxin began to diminish. Dr. Yilden arrived in the medical bay during the 8th hour of treatment, her expression mixing hope with disbelief. "Dr. Chun, the entire ship is talking about what you've accomplished. No one believed that primitive human medicine could succeed where our most advanced technology failed." Sarah smiled tiredly. She and her team had been working without rest, constantly adjusting medications and monitoring the complex interaction between human and Zephyrian medical approaches. "Dr. Yildan, I think you're missing the point," Sarah replied. "It wasn't primitive human medicine that succeeded. It was the combination of human and Zephyrian medicine working together. Your technology provided the precision and power we needed, but only after our methods confused the weapon enough to make precision possible." As if responding to their conversation, Queen Virithess stirred in her chamber. Her eyelids fluttered, and for the first time in days, she drew a deep, steady breath. "She's regaining consciousness," Dr. Kethmori announced, his voice filled with wonder. "Neural activity is returning to normal patterns." General Mordak moved to the Queen's chamber as her eyes opened fully. The black veins that had marked her skin were now barely visible, and her natural luminescence was beginning to return. "My Queen," Mordak said softly, "how do you feel?" Queen Virithess looked around the medical bay with obvious confusion before her gaze settled on Sarah and her team. "General, who are these beings? And why do I feel as though I've been fighting a war inside my own body?" "Your Majesty," Dr. Kethmori explained, "you were poisoned with a Drakthul bioweapon. Dr. Chun and her human medical team saved your life using methods that challenged conventional medical theory." Queen Virithess studied Sarah with growing interest. "Dr. Chun, is it? I owe you my life, but I suspect this story is more complex than a simple medical treatment." Sarah approached the Queen's chamber respectfully. "Your Majesty, the toxin was designed specifically to counter advanced medical technology like yours. We succeeded because we used primitive human methods to confuse the weapon while Dr. Kethmori used Zephyrian technology to repair the damage." "Ingenious," Queen Virithess said, though her expression grew troubled as memory returned. "But tell me, General, what is our current tactical situation? I assume the Drakthul didn't poison me simply to watch me suffer." General Mordak's expression grew grim. Your Majesty, they've assembled an invasion fleet of over 300 ships. They're approximately 36 hours from our border, apparently waiting for confirmation of her death before beginning their attack. Queen Virithess attempted to sit up in her chamber, though she was clearly still weak from her ordeal. Then, we must prepare our defenses immediately. How long before I'm fit for duty? Dr. Kethmori exchanged glances with Sarah before answering. Your Majesty, while the toxin has been neutralized, your system needs time to fully recover. I would recommend at least 48 hours of rest. 48 hours we don't have, the Queen replied firmly. Dr. Chun, in your medical opinion, what are the risks if I resume my duties immediately? Sarah considered the question carefully. Queen Virithess was alive and conscious, but her body had been through an ordeal that would have killed most beings. Yet Sarah could see the determination in the Queen's eyes, the same determination that had led her people for 2 centuries. Your Majesty, Sarah said, medically speaking, you need rest. But for what I've learned about leadership during wartime, sometimes leaders have to function when they're not at full strength. The real question is whether you can be effective enough to rally your people and coordinate a defense. Queen Virithess smiled, the first time Sarah had seen her express anything approaching humor. Dr. Chun, you have a practical understanding of leadership that many military officers lack. Yes, I believe I can be effective enough. She turned to General Mordak. Summon the Royal Council immediately. Prepare emergency broadcasts to all member worlds. And send a message to the human government. Dr. Chun and her team have earned the eternal gratitude of the Zephyrian Federation. As the Queen began issuing orders with growing strength, Sarah felt a complex mixture of relief and apprehension. They had saved Queen Virithess's life, but the real test was just beginning. In 36 hours, the largest Drakthul invasion fleet in history would arrive at the Zephyrian border. The Queen was alive, but would she be strong enough to lead her people through the greatest crisis they had ever faced? And would the cooperation between human and Zephyrian medicine that had saved her life serve as a model for the kind of interspecies cooperation that might be needed to defeat the Drakthul Empire? Sarah looked at her exhausted team. Patricia and Marcus had worked tirelessly for over 18 hours to help save an alien queen they had never met before. Their willingness to risk everything for a species they barely knew represented something important about humanity that Sarah hoped would inspire the Zephyrian Federation in the difficult days ahead. The medical crisis was over, but the real battle was about to begin. And everything would depend on whether Queen Virithess could rally her people and their allies to face an enemy that had spent decades preparing for this moment of perceived weakness. The fate of the galaxy was about to be decided by leaders who had been given a second chance, and by the courage of beings from different species who had learned to work together when everything depended on cooperation rather than competition. Queen Virithess stood on the bridge of the eternal dawn, her recovery nothing short of miraculous. Though still pale from her ordeal, her presence radiated the calm authority that had made her one of the most respected leaders in the galaxy. Around her, the Royal Council worked frantically to coordinate the defense of over 200 worlds against the approaching Drakthul invasion fleet. Dr. Sarah Chan watched from a nearby console, still amazed at how quickly the Queen had regained her strength. The combination of human and Zephyrian medicine had not only saved her life, but had created a synergistic healing effect that exceeded what either approach could have achieved alone. Dr. Chun, Queen Virithess called, turning from the tactical display. Your presence here is no coincidence. The Drakthul chose to poison me now because they believed our species could never work together effectively. They were wrong. Sarah approached the Queen respectfully. Your Majesty, I was just doing my job. But you're right, this crisis has shown something important about cooperation between species. Indeed, the Queen replied. And that lesson may be more valuable than even my survival. General Mordak stepped forward with the latest intelligence reports. Your Majesty, the Drakthul fleet has reached our outer sensor grid. 347 ships, including their flagship Dark Conquest. They're broadcasting a surrender ultimatum to all member worlds. What are they demanding? Queen Virithess asked. Complete submission to the Drakthul Empire, Mordak replied grimly. Dissolution of the Zephyrian Federation, conversion of all member worlds to imperial colonies, and... He hesitated. And what, General? They're demanding that you be delivered to them for public execution, along with Dr. Chun and her team. They consider the medical treatment that saved your life to be an act of war against their bioweapon program. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She had known that challenging the Drakthul bioweapon would have consequences, but she hadn't expected to become a target for an entire empire. Queen Virithess's expression hardened. Then, they've made this personal. Dr. Chun, how do you feel about being declared an enemy of the Drakthul Empire? Sarah managed a wry smile. Your Majesty, my father spent his career fighting the Drakthul. I suppose it runs in the family. Your father, the Queen said thoughtfully. Admiral Chun Wei, who defeated them at the Battle of Kepler, 442. Yes, I can see the resemblance. Not physical, but in spirit. Communication Officer Velterra interrupted from her station. Your Majesty, we're receiving responses to your emergency broadcasts. The member worlds are mobilizing their defense fleets, but they're afraid, Queen Virithess finished. They've lived in peace for so long that the idea of war seems unthinkable. Dr. Keth Mori approached the group, carrying a medical tablet. Your Majesty, I've been analyzing the toxin that nearly killed you. Dr. Chin's breakthrough has given us insights into Drakthul biotechnology that we never had before. Explain, the Queen ordered. The bioweapon wasn't just designed to kill you, Dr. Keth Mori said. It was designed to make your death appear to be from natural causes, a sudden, incurable illness that would leave your people demoralized and leaderless. But because Dr. Chun forced the toxin to reveal its true nature, we now understand how Drakthul bioweapons actually function. Sarah leaned forward, intrigued. Are you saying we could develop countermeasures? More than that, Dr. Keth Mori replied excitedly. The toxin's adaptation protocols follow patterns we can now predict. If we can synthesize the right combination of human and Zephyrian medical compounds, we might be able to create a universal vaccine against Drakthul biological weapons. Queen Virithess's eyes brightened with possibility. How long would such a development take? Under normal circumstances, years, Dr. Keth Mori admitted. But Dr. Chun has shown us that unconventional approaches can accelerate the process dramatically. With her team's help, we might be able to produce a basic vaccine within hours. Sarah felt the weight of another impossible decision. Dr. Keth Mori, are you asking my team to help develop biological weapons? Not weapons, the Queen interjected. Defenses. Dr. Chun, the Drakthul have been using biological warfare for decades, terrorizing species across the galaxy. A universal vaccine would save countless lives. Sarah looked at her team. Patricia and Marcus were exhausted from their work saving the Queen, but she could see determination in their eyes. They had come here to save one life and discovered they might be able to save millions. We'll help, Sarah decided. But I want it clearly understood. This vaccine will be shared with all species, not used as a weapon by any government or military. Queen Virithess nodded solemnly. Agreed. Medical knowledge should serve all life, not political interests. As Dr. Keth Mori and Sarah's team began working on the vaccine, General Mordak continued coordinating the military response. The Zephyrian Federation had never been a military power. Their strength came from diplomacy, trade, and technological advancement. But their member worlds had ships, and more importantly, they had something the Drakthul had never expected: allies. Your Majesty, Communication Officer Velterra announced, we're receiving a transmission from Earth. Admiral Chinwei is requesting permission to speak with you directly. Sarah looked up from her medical work in surprise. Her father was contacting the Zephyrian flagship personally? That was highly unusual. Earth's military rarely involved itself directly in galactic politics. Queen Virithess nodded to Velterra. Put him through. The main display activated, showing the bridge of a human military vessel. Admiral Chun Wei stood at attention, his uniform bearing the insignia of Earth's deep space fleet. Sarah felt a surge of pride seeing her father, though she wondered what had brought him so far from Earth space. Your Majesty, Admiral Chun began, I understand my daughter has been instrumental in saving your life. I also understand that the Drakthal Empire has declared her an enemy combatant. That is correct, Admiral, Queen Virithess replied. Your daughter's courage and medical expertise prevented a galactic catastrophe. Admiral Chun smiled grimly. Your Majesty, the Drakthal made a serious mistake when they threatened my daughter. I'm here with a combined fleet of 47 human vessels to assist in your defense. Sarah stared at the display in shock. Her father had brought nearly a quarter of Earth's deep space fleet to help defend the Zephyrian Federation. It was an unprecedented commitment of human military resources. Admiral, Queen Virithess said, your assistance is welcome, but 47 ships against 347 represents difficult odds. Agreed, Your Majesty, Admiral Chun replied. But the Drakthal have never faced a coordinated defense by multiple species before. And we have something they don't expect, detailed intelligence about their battle tactics from decades of border conflicts. General Mordak stepped into view of the transmission. Admiral Chun, what do you propose? A layered defense strategy, Admiral Chun explained. Zephyrian ships excel at long-range coordination and defensive systems. Human ships are more maneuverable and better suited for close-quarters combat. If we combine our tactical advantages, we can force them to fight a type of battle they're not prepared for. As the two military leaders began coordinating their defense plans, Sarah continued working with Dr. Kethmori on the vaccine. The process was unlike anything she had experienced before, combining human intuition with Zephyrian precision to create something that neither species could have developed alone. Dr. Chun, Mark is called from his analysis station. I think we've got it. The vaccine is stable, and our projections show it should be effective against the full range of known Drakthal bioweapons. Dr. Kethmori confirmed the analysis with his quantum scanners. Remarkable. We've accomplished in 6 hours what should have taken years. Dr. Chun, your species' approach to medicine is far more sophisticated than we realized. Sarah smiled tiredly. Dr. Kethmori, sophistication isn't always about advanced technology. Sometimes it's about understanding that the simple approach works better than the complicated one. Queen Virithess approached their workstation, studying the vaccine synthesis data. How quickly can this be produced and distributed? Our medical fabrication systems can produce enough vaccine for all member worlds within 12 hours, Dr. Kethmori replied. Distribution will take longer, but we can begin with military personnel and essential civilians. Do it, the Queen ordered, and transmit the complete formula to all allied species, including Earth. This defense belongs to everyone. Admiral Vextar, who had been monitoring long-range sensors, suddenly called out, Your Majesty, the Drakthal fleet has begun moving. They're advancing on multiple vectors, apparently targeting our 5 most heavily populated worlds simultaneously. Queen Virithess moved to the tactical display, her recovered strength evident in her confident movements. General Mordak, deploy our fleets according to the plan you and Admiral Chun developed. All medical facilities are to begin immediate vaccine production and distribution. She turned to address the entire bridge crew. My friends, the Drakthal Empire has spent decades preparing for this moment. They poisoned me, believing it would paralyze our civilization with grief and uncertainty. They assembled the largest invasion fleet in their history, expecting to find us weak and divided. The Queen's voice grew stronger, carrying the authority that had inspired peace across 200 worlds. They were wrong. We are not weak because we choose peace. We are not divided because we welcome diversity. And we are not alone because we value cooperation over conquest. Sarah watched as the crew responded to their Queen's words with renewed determination. The fear and uncertainty that had gripped the ship during her illness was being replaced by something more powerful: unified purpose. Dr. Chun, Queen Virithess said, turning to address Sarah directly, "Your species has a saying, does it not? Death came for the queen, but found a doctor instead." Sarah was confused for a moment before realizing the queen was making a play on words about the situation. "Something like that, your majesty." "Then, let us send a message to the Drakthal Empire," the queen continued. "They sent death for me, but they found something they didn't expect: cooperation between species, medical innovation that defies their understanding, and the determination to defend not just territory, but the principles that make civilization worth preserving." The bridge erupted in communications as the final preparations for battle commenced. Fleets moved into position, vaccines began production, and across 200 worlds, beings who had lived in peace for generations prepared to defend everything they had built. Sarah looked out at the stars, knowing that somewhere in that darkness, the largest military force the Drakthal Empire had ever assembled was approaching with the intention of destroying everything she had worked to save. But she also knew that they would find something they hadn't expected: unity between species that had learned to combine their strengths rather than compete with their weaknesses. The medical crisis that had brought her here was over, but it had become the catalyst for something larger. The galaxy was about to discover what was possible when different species worked together, not just in crisis, but in hope for a better future. Death had indeed come for the alien queen, but it had found something more powerful than any individual life. It had found the determination of civilizations that refused to surrender to fear. And sometimes that was enough to change the course of history itself. As the first reports of battle reached the eternal dawn, Queen Virithess stood strong and confident. Her recovery is symbol of the cooperation that would either save the galaxy or inspire others to continue the fight for peace. The outcome was still uncertain, but for the first time since the crisis began, hope seemed stronger than fear. And in the medical bay, a small vial of vaccine represented proof that even the most sophisticated weapons could be defeated by beings willing to work together, think differently, and never give up on the possibility that healing was stronger than harm.